Welcome. I'm Ruxus Fun, and this is Mindful Drawing, a weekly practice that brings our physical space, our movement, and this creative act of drawing into a place of meditation, a place to let our creativity explore, and to also bring attention to how we engage with the medium, the pen or the pencil, the paper, to hopefully find a little bit of relaxation and maybe develop our skills through drawing. This week will be a bit of an experiment. It may take a little more skill than you're used to if you follow along with this series, just in the sense of having practice and experience visualizing three-dimensional things. But we'll take it slow, and we're just drawing shapes on a page and giving them a little bit of a boundary or surface to flow along. And if it extends out and becomes flatter or two-dimensional or more about pattern, that's okay too. Just follow along and see where kind of the guided practice takes you. I'll work back and forth a little bit today between pen and pencil, between something light to give general figure to the page, and then using the pen and its darkness to bring contrast, to pull things out of the background. But whatever you have to work with, pen, pencil, marker, anything at your disposal, go ahead and grab that, get a pad of paper and a piece of scrap to start with, and let's draw together. I was thinking about doing something that might be a little complicated, but also is just a bunch of lines and curves, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like, but it's something fun that came out of my sketchbook this morning. So we'll do a warm-up to kind of get the idea of it, and then from there, take it however kind of makes sense for you and how you can work with it. But I was thinking of bringing some kind of object three-dimensionality to the practice this time, and we can begin that with something sphere-like, egg-like, just by starting with making roughly a circle of some kind. Doesn't matter too much if it's a little squished or wobbly, but starting to get a feel for that curvature, moving around it, just maybe working back and forth a couple of times to feel out the motion of the shape. And we move into the larger exercise. You can play with size and how that feels comfortable with the arm. But if we were to take something like this as a kind of spherical round object, one thing we can do is establish some axes, one roughly in the long direction, and again, exactly where it goes is not too important. Somewhere around the center, there'll be one that goes vertical, kind of straight up and down, and then one that goes somewhat perpendicular to the shorter direction. If you have a circle, these are just choosing one direction or the other, but you kind of get this basic axis, a little bit of a compressed X shape with a vertical line going through it. We don't necessarily need these, but they help as guides for drawing something kind of curvy. And on that long axis, if we begin at one point and look at where it crosses the curved shape in two places, we can bring another curve running along about the same route, but a little bit shifted from the outline there, and that sets up a place of intersection with another axis. Similarly, on the vertical, kind of crosses these two places, so we can have a curve that runs through other points of intersection, just around, trying to approximate that front side of a more three-dimensional curvature. And then we have one more that we might follow around, coming through along a curved axis here, or anywhere else that starts to describe some of that form. One that comes up over the top, very similar to the first. And we have started to make some distinction between that outer profile, silhouette, and some of the inner guide wires and lines. And again, if they bump, if they shift around, if they don't quite line up, that's just part of the form of the shape and something to experiment and work with. But if that kind of sets us up, I might try another one quick without the guides and just get a feel there with a few revolutions of a large profile shape, choosing points along its edge to begin to connect as a foreground, taking those same points and connecting them up over. This one probably could just go all the way up. And then somewhere in the middle. All right. And again, slightly different shape starts to emerge, but we can find some of these quadrants. We can play around with a wireframe, the panel series there, just to get comfortable with what might start to come out of drawing with this. And many of them, all of them, maybe a new sheet will become a bit of a practice. We'll see what emerges and draw into that space. With the general idea in mind, maybe something floats into your kind of vision or thinking. Those looked like lemons or limes to me, but maybe it's more geometric or spherical or egg-like, whatever gives you a little bit of notion. And taking a nice breath in, maybe just running the hand over the page for a second to kind of feel the extension of your arm and where it finds a comfortable area to start working. We can always reposition ourselves to continue working. And on the next breath in, just begin to lightly create that shape. Letting it track around a couple of times. The extra lines will just fade into the background, will give us that establishing sense of space, using a bit of a light pencil, just to let it not fill up too much of my vision. And in that tracking around, thinking of 2 points somewhat opposite each other as a place to start, connecting through the space, bringing the curves from tangent out into the foreground of the front. At some point, that curve drifting from behind, leaning into the front, and then slipping into the back, ambiguous between foreground and background. Similarly, on the, say, top and bottom, whatever that is for you, that curve that comes into the foreground and then slips back, running over it a couple of times to find the smoothness, letting previous attempts just be part of the background, the construction. You can always come back and touch things up as we play. And that's enough to start to see something. Perhaps there's one more that drifts up to the top and then vanishes into the background, just to give it a little bit more roundness in another direction. Finding here a bit of the space on the page and looking for what we might see into it. And as I get it established, I think I'm going to play between some different tools, but stick with whatever feels comfortable to you. And now that we have this grid in space, what can we find within it? Something I think can be fun is just beginning anywhere along a line and maybe picking it up for a minute and then drawing out into the space, occasionally approaching some of the other lines, but just letting the pen or pencil wander for a while. Maybe loop back, thinking this might be a spiral or figure inscribed onto the surface. Picking up that median and letting it again draw really just some shapes, some two-dimensional figures, but tracking along that equator or drifting from it. Taking a breath in and finding a new location, continuing to occasionally bend with the curves, but then feel free to sink out or coincide for a little while. My space or my drawing beginning to emphasize that structure. You can avoid it, work within it. Just using this time to explore and play what we might see on the surface. Because we've set up some foundation, some structure to hold our lines, they oscillate between their 2D nature on the page and kind of guiding into that shape there in the background. And just work with this first egg shape to continue filling things in, letting some of them disappear out into the background to merge with the profile curves as they run around the back where we can't see. And occasionally can slip back into our vision, playing, experimenting, drawing within a constructed bit of landscape. And if any part of the spheroid, the volume begins to get crowded, you can always start another one. Begin somewhere new, maybe add some little details, playing into the periphery, into the edges. Giving a little dimension out there, reinforcing the profile, and getting ourselves in a bit warmed up with a place of play in drawing curves or lines, a place of letting our eyes adapt and begin to see into a potential virtual space rounded by those guides. If it gets messy or convoluted, feel free to start a new place or keep working through just one. When you have a good density of curves, just gradually following those first arcs we set up in a couple of directions, something bounded by that rough egg shape, we can now begin to draw into it, either reinforcing that structure of the curve. You can think of these as like a series of rings. Come back with a light pencil line just to visualize it. But in here, same kind of ring goes around the whole background, just an ellipse, ovoid shape, drawing a few of them in one axis. It helps to give structure to the page. And again, if any of this technique is new or complicated, we're just also drawing some shapes and seeing what they look like inside of a more round other shape. So that works too. Maybe take a little time giving this structure to connect with our breathing, taking a breath in and creating a new ring around the shape. A breath in, starting from an edge, peeling in and making a kind of parallel ring, stepping along the shape. Creating some contours, reaching towards the left or right, the top or the bottom. It just begins to fill in some of the roundness and get a feel for it. Making, in a sense, a bit of a grid there on the paper. Or just beginning anywhere on the page at any time with a fresh shape. And looking at putting at least 2 arcs across its surface. Which begin to form that perception of 3D. And really just an oval or a circle and 2 arcs that cross it somewhere. I think I'll go back into my patterned one and continue just exploring what some of these crevices could be. If I start from a line, follow it for a while, then maybe peel away to reconnect back a few times. At first, just giving it some offset, working perhaps in layers between 2 shapes. Eventually, perhaps something will visually start to form there. We'll see. Treating each squiggle or doodle as just a place to play and search in a little bit of a 3D framework, but without worrying about the construction of the form. Just looking for what you might see as you take curves you created, you generated, and begin to fill in a little bit of space. As lines begin to hold in some density, perhaps creating a little overlap of figure and foreground. You can always highlight some edges with a retracing or re-overlap of the original lines, thickening or darkening to distinguish some of that inside from outside space. And to move our eyes and hands through what we've created before. Just a retracing to bring foreground out from the back, to let new lines fall into the distance. And the more we project a sequence of lines in a direction, and starting to establish grids or follow curvatures from the structure below, where things might begin to emerge with a visual sense of three-dimensionality, but it may not without a very rigorous structure. We just follow it along and see what's there. As complexity grows in the drawing, the overlaps of structure, we have a place now to exercise a bit of our vision, exercise a bit of how our eyes track through a dense environment, to breathe through some of the complexity and overlap. Focus in on each new line, to practice letting go a little bit of that expectation or tension, letting go a little bit of what may feel like a struggle to see. Zoom in to new places or just create new shapes. And focus on the lines. Maybe experiment a little with that structure in the background, the concentric rings gradually shrinking or expanding out from the center or in from the poles of the shape. You have something that can make marks quickly or add a lot of tone or value fast, like a marker or thick pen. Begin to add some shading, even a nice pencil. To fill in some of the voids. To perhaps look at the spaces in between. Or continue offsetting, layering, and meandering with the curves that track along that egg-shaped object, just to see where they go. Draw kind of quietly and explore. Let the doodle stay within the bounds, or maybe extend out and reach into other portions of the page. This seed or starting point, just establishing that space for us to begin to look into the drawing, to manage our vision, complexity, and practice bringing attention in to the moment where we are for a little bit without concern of where everything is going. You're able to do a little shading or more intense filling with the pen or pencil that you're using these last few minutes or so. Just bringing the attention to the sensation of how those layers of material fill in on the page. Do you feel the graphite or ink building up, accumulating like a slickness here with the graphite, or that transformation as the paper fibers fill with ink? Can you bring your new attention in the space, time of the drawing to for a couple of minutes to feel out how the mediums interact? And if this is all very new drawing technique for you, just having some fun, trying something new, giving yourselves a few moments to enjoy that, no matter what the outcome may look like. With practice and repetition, we can find an interface to whatever technique might be there. But we try it first and see what we might come up with and where it might go. Welcome back. With the increasing city of form, we are challenged by how our eyes see, how we interpret that virtual space of the page, and maybe some of our prior skill in working with three-dimensional figures and shapes. Here, my background working with a lot of 3D modeling programs, being used to manipulating geometry in that three-dimensional space of the computer environment helps make some of this maybe feel more natural. But if to you it looks weird or strange or gets kind of lumpy or never really takes on that volume of curvature, that's okay. You are where you are, and the drawing you make is the drawing you make. Enjoy it, have fun in the moment, and use it as to practice managing that complexity, the density of lines, the ways of organizing along regulating systems to give us structure. And see what you can bring to the rest of your day and the rest of your life with that creativity oscillating between organization and structure, a guidance for the basic form, and see how you can bring that thing of organizing a structure, giving shape and guidance to the basic form of an idea or a concept, working in layers of detail, breaking it down smaller parts, and really focusing on what you may be doing at any one time, looking every once in a while at the whole and seeing how to tie it all together, create that orchestra of form and space. This is Rooks is Fun signing off. Thank you for joining, and draw well. A little time to have some fun with drawing in the morning, and then head back into the rest of our day, hopefully with a little bit of creativity. The Rooks is Fun, signing off.